Guys, in this video, I help one of my clients understand the difference between constructed clarity and conditioned clarity, as well as the differentiation between certain narratives and triggers when repriming your subconscious mind for success. Okay, enjoy the video. Talk soon.
The first thing that we really need to do is we need to have clarity. Okay, because clarity is what's going to allow us to have the proper intention, which is going to trigger the proper action necessary to breed the proper result. Yeah, it's similar to what we talked about earlier, right? So we have conditioned clarity, which is learned beliefs, defaults, and scripts that we basically live our life through, right? This is like kind of like how we were conditioned to live, right? How we grew up, what we grew up believing, what we got sold, right? So this is the first thing that we need to understand, the differentiation between conditioned clarity and constructed clarity. Okay, constructed clarity is it's a lot more intentional. It's intentionally designed, right? Choices that are very basically designed in cadence with who it is that you're trying to become, and developing proper systems around that person, right? So how does this look like in regards to work, health, and relationships, right? Default goals and inherited career scripts, right? Identity-based habits and comfort loops, addictions, and mindsets. This is similar to the avoidance that we were talking about, right? So these things are conditioned. The only way that we're going to have the proper clarity to move forward into the next stage of what God has for us is if we have first clarity on the conditioned clarity and then clarity on the constructed clarity, right? This goes the same for relationships, health, how you operate on your day-to-day. The only way that you can move forward is if you have the proper constructed clarity in regards to how, like, what work you want to be doing, how you need to be taking care of yourself, right? How you show up and operate in the relationships that you operate in, right? There's going to be narratives and there's going to be triggers that are fed from both conditioned clarity and constructed clarity. The whole idea is to restructure the conditioned clarity and the narratives and triggers that are tied into the conditioned clarity to then have constructed clarity by rewriting the narratives and triggers around the constructive clarity. Okay. And the way that we do that is by basically having a complete audit of basically the narratives and the triggers through a past self audit exercise. Okay. So what that looks like is basically outlining habits, triggers, vices, right? Locations, people, actions. Okay. This is the only way that we're going to have clarity on how we've been conditioned to operate in today's society to then reprogram and supercharge the subconscious emotional recalibration to get clear on where we want to go, right? So here we have narrative clarity, right? This is basically data from old experiences, emotions, and perceptions that feed a perspective that you operate from. That's how we operate. That's our worldview. Like you said, your worldview, you feel like your worldview is fucked up. The reason why is because you're operating from a narrative that needs to be recalibrated. You understand?
Yep.
So from there, we have basically trigger clarity. Okay. So our triggers are basically things that happen, how we act basically from old narratives. Okay. So basically we have our intellect turns off because we're not really thinking about the trigger. We're just thinking about the past emotions that we've experienced is based off of old narratives and old actions that have happened. An event that sparks a trigger. So this is basically what makes up the trigger. Okay. So let's say something happens, a trigger sparks, right? Past emotions become awakened due to that trigger. And then your intellect completely turns off, right? And what happens is that we act based off an old narrative. So let's say that you were abused when you were young, for example, and whenever your dad was raising his voice or whatever, and then somebody in the future, whenever you're old, is now raising their voice at you, and then it sparks a trigger, which makes you feed off an old narrative, right? An event sparks a reaction, triggering past emotions, ideals, and perspectives, which triggers an action that stems from an old narrative. So the only way that we can get clear on how to really design ourselves into a newly conceived self is if we first get clear on the narratives that are being triggered by certain actions, and then rewriting those narratives so that we give it a different meaning in our heads, right? And in our subconscious mind, right? The only way to move forward about understanding the triggers that are forcing you to act from an old narrative, okay? Past triggers or past event plus triggered emotions plus suppressed reasoning equals reinforced loop. Okay. Here we have the Ikigai, right? This is basically how to really find your meaning of life and how to operate in proper synergy with who it is that you're trying to become. Okay. So here you have what you love, you have what the world needs, and you have what you can be paid for, and you have what you're good at. Right now, you're operating right here, what you can be paid for. So you know what the world needs, and you know there's something that you love out there. We need to get clear on what you love and what the world needs and what you're good at, right? And what you can be paid for. We need right here. This is the center. This is the Ikigai, right? Most people that are operating in misalignment, they're operating in what they can be paid for and what they're kind of good at, but they don't believe the world needs it, and they don't believe that this is what they love to do. And this is exactly what makes you feel like you misalign, like you don't want to be alive anymore, you know?
Yeah,
So the problem with this is that and this is the thing, is that you don't have any leverage over this position. This is the problem. So the position is here, right? fulfillment is multiple things. It's not just money. It's not just you know, it's not just status. It's not just looks. It's not just like family. It's multiple things that you need to have control over, right? Whenever you have no specification and you're not specific on what it is that you're attempting, you have, for example, you have only profession here, right? Because you're only doing what you can be paid for and what you're good at.
Yep.
So the issue is that you don't have proper leverage over your position, because in order for you to have proper leverage over your position, you need to have passion, mission, profession, and vocation. This is what fulfillment looks like. You have more leverage over the current position because you're focusing on what's important in life rather than just sacrificing yourself. And this is why you feel like you have no control, because you're not actually following your heart's call for truth. So this is what we need to understand. Your life is a formulation of inputs and outputs. Okay. So this is the equation that I was explaining before. A squared plus B squared equals C squared, right? So this is the only way that we can get the proper outputs, is if we have the proper inputs. A and B are the inputs and C is the output. Okay. Your life is a byproduct of your inputs, right? So here we have internal work, which is identity, mindset, beliefs. Okay. B, we have external work, which is basically the skills, actions, and systems that you develop. And C equals the results that you're living in your day to day. Okay. It's in the math, right? The beautiful thing about life is that God created life as a design. It has a specific design, and there are equations that are just true. Okay. So most people obsess over C, which is the result, without understanding that C is never directly controllable, right? It is always the product of what A and B are. Okay. So for example, A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So A squared, if you don't train, and B squared, you have a shitty diet, then you're going to be a beta male, for example. If you train plus have a good diet, you're going to be a suboptimal male, for example. Midnight Mafia plus suboptimal male equals alpha male, right?
So guys, this was basically a brief behind the scenes with one of my clients. If you guys have any more questions or want to learn more on how we launch and scale our clients' businesses to six-figure months, you guys can follow me on Instagram at Sean Paul Wolf, and I will see you guys in the next one. Ciao.